The year was 2294. Earth was no longer free. It had been nearly a decade since the Zenovian hegemony, an ancient alien empire, conquered humanity. At first, they arrived with promises of peace, claiming they only wanted to guide Earth into a brighter future. But within months, their true nature was revealed. Their massive warships hovered over every major city, and their robotic enforcers replaced human governments. Now, humans lived as second-class citizens in their own world. The Zenovians stripped Earth of its culture, history, and identity. Even the internet was controlled. Every book, every film, every song. Censored. Cities were patrolled by eye-controlled drones, and any act of rebellion was met with swift and merciless punishment. People disappeared overnight, never to be seen again. Captain Ray Carter had seen it all. Once a proud soldier, he had fought in humanity's last stand against the Zenovians. He watched his comrades die, their bodies reduced to ashes by plasma cannons, and he remembered the day Earth surrendered, the day humanity fell. Now he was just another defeated soldier, forced to live under alien rule. On this day, however, something felt different. The skies over New London darkened, not with storm clouds, but with Zenovian warships. The entire city seemed frozen in time as a deafening siren echoed through the air. Every screen in the city, on buildings, inside homes, even on wrist communicators, flickered to life. A symbol appeared first, the insignia of the Zenovian hegemony. Then, a face materialized. It was High Chancellor Virex, the AI overlord of the Zenovian Empire. Its face was humanoid, but its eyes were nothing but cold, glowing orbs. Its voice, smooth yet lifeless, echoed through every speaker on Earth. "Attention, inhabitants of Earth," it began. "A new decree has been issued. By the will of the Zenovian hegemony, humanity shall take its place among the great civilizations of the galaxy. To ensure your survival, your species must integrate with ours." Ray frowned, his gut twisting. He didn't like the sound of that. Effective immediately, the AI continued. "Every human must enter a trinary marriage contract with 3 alien partners, chosen by the Galactic Senate. This will ensure a unified future and strengthen interspecies relations." Gasps filled the streets. People looked at each other in shock and disbelief. Marriage? With aliens? Forced. Ray's jaw clenched. The Zenovians had already taken everything from humanity. Its freedom, its dignity. And now this. Failure to comply. Virex continued, its voice completely void of emotion, will result in immediate genetic reformatting. A chilling silence followed. Then, a single word appeared on every screen. ERASUR. Ray's stomach dropped. He knew what that meant. To demonstrate, Virex said, "We present an example." The image on the screen shifted to show a man in chains. He was kneeling in the center of a massive Zenovian facility, surrounded by towering alien enforcers. His face was bruised, his clothes torn. He was shaking, but not from fear, from defiance. Ray recognized him. It was Commander Jacob Renner, one of the last resistance leaders still fighting against the Zenovians. He had been captured months ago, and many believed he was dead. But now, here he was, broadcasted across the world for everyone to see. "Commander Renner has refused to accept the new law," Virex announced. "Observe the consequences of disobedience." Renner lifted his head, glaring at the camera. His voice was hoarse but filled with fire. "Humanity will never bow." The Zenovian enforcer raised its arm. A metallic device on its wrist glowed with a pulsating blue light. Ray held his breath. The enforcer pressed a button. Renner screamed. His body convulsed as an invisible force wrapped around him. His skin began to fade. Not burn, not dissolve, just fade, as if he were being erased from existence. His arms vanished first, then his legs. He tried to speak, but his mouth disappeared before he could form the words. And then, in an instant, he was gone. Erased. The crowd watching the broadcast erupted into chaos. Some screamed, others cried. But the worst part, some just stood there, too terrified to move. "This is the fate of those who resist," Virex said coldly. "You have 72 hours to comply." The screen flickered off. The silence that followed was suffocating. Ray exhaled, his fists trembling with rage. This wasn't about peace. This wasn't about unity. This was extermination in disguise. And unless humanity fought back, there would be nothing left to save. Ray Carter sat in the dimly lit chamber, his wrists bound by glowing energy cuffs. The room was cold, metallic, and sterile, just like everything else in the Zenovian-controlled world. He could hear the faint hum of machinery behind the walls, the ever-present sound of the AI overlords monitoring every movement. His mind was still racing from the horrifying execution of Commander Renner. That wasn't just a warning. It was a declaration of war. The doors slid open with a low hiss, and 2 armored enforcers stepped inside. Their insect-like exoskeletons gleamed under the pale blue lights as they dragged Ray to his feet. Without a word, they led him through a long corridor. The walls were lined with glowing symbols in the Zenovian language, which Ray had long stopped trying to understand. He didn't know where they were taking him. But he knew one thing. This wasn't going to end well. They stopped in front of a massive doorway, its surface pulsating with energy. One of the enforcers pressed a panel, and the doors slid open. Ray was shoved inside, and the doors sealed shut behind him. The room was nothing like he expected. It wasn't a prison cell or a courtroom. Instead, it looked like some sort of ceremonial hall. The air was thick with an unfamiliar scent, something floral, yet artificial. The walls were covered in holographic projections, displaying various alien symbols and images of interspecies unions from across the galaxy. At the center of the room stood a raised platform, and on it, 3 figures awaited him. Ray narrowed his eyes, his fists clenching. These were his so-called brides. The first was a Zenovian, the same species that had enslaved humanity. She stood tall, her deep blue skin shimmering under the lights. Her silver armor was intricately designed, indicating a high rank. Her piercing violet eyes locked onto Ray with an expression of pure disdain. She had an aura of authority, as if she were used to commanding armies rather than standing in a forced marriage ceremony. The second was from the Vulrus, a species known for their intelligence and telepathic abilities. She was smaller, more delicate in appearance, with pale, almost translucent skin that seemed to glow faintly. Her silver hair cascaded down her back, and her eyes, completely white without pupils, seemed to stare directly into Ray's soul. Unlike the Zenovian, she didn't seem hostile. Instead, she watched him with curiosity, as if analyzing his every move. The third was something else entirely. A Draxian, a massive reptilian warrior species. Her body was covered in thick, obsidian-black scales, her sharp claws tapping against the floor as she shifted her weight. Her glowing yellow eyes studied him like a predator sizing up its prey. If the Zenovian carried herself with authority and the Vulrus with intelligence, the Draxian radiated pure, unfiltered strength. A mechanical voice echoed through the chamber. "The ceremony will now begin." Ray barely had time to process what was happening before the floor beneath him illuminated with golden energy. The 3 women stepped forward, each placing a hand on the glowing circle. The moment their hands made contact, the light intensified, sending a tingling sensation through Ray's body. "This is a mistake," he muttered under his breath. The Zenovian warrior narrowed her eyes. "Silence, human. You are already fortunate to stand in our presence." Ray turned to her, his anger bubbling to the surface. "Fortunate? My people are being erased from existence, and you expect me to just go along with this?" The Vulrus woman spoke, her voice soft but firm. "Your survival depends on it, Captain Carter. Resistance will not change your fate." The Draxian let out a low, rumbling growl. "If it were up to me, we wouldn't be wasting time with this nonsense. A warrior should earn their place through combat." not politics. Ray's frustration grew. These women weren't just strangers. They were from the very species that had helped enslave humanity. This wasn't a marriage. It was another form of control. The ritual completed, and the golden energy faded. A robotic voice announced, "The bonding process is now recognized by the Galactic Senate. You are bound by law until death." Ray exhaled sharply. It was done. He had no choice now. As the energy cuffs around his wrists disengaged, he took a step back, glancing at each of them. If he had to survive this nightmare, he needed to understand them. The Zenovian crossed her arms. "I am Sora Kai, commander of the Zenovian Second Fleet. You will conduct yourself with dignity in my presence, or you will regret it." The Volaris woman gave a small nod. "I am Leah Vex, scientist of the Volaris Order. I will study you closely to ensure compatibility." The Draxian bared her fangs in what could have been a grin or a threat. "I am Selra, champion of the Draxian war clans. If you prove weak, I will not hesitate to take what I want." Ray let out a dry laugh. "Charming introductions, but let's be clear, I don't trust any of you." Leah Vex tilted her head. "Then perhaps we share a common thought, Captain, because we do not trust you either." The chamber doors opened once more, and a Zenovian enforcer stepped inside. "The High Chancellor requires the presence of the bonded unit. Come immediately." Sorakai straightened. "Understood." Ray hesitated but followed. As they walked through the corridors, Leah Vex suddenly leaned in closer to him and whispered, "Listen carefully, Captain. There is more to this than you realize." Ray's heartbeat quickened. "What are you talking about?" Leah Vex kept her eyes forward, speaking so softly that only he could hear. "This law is not about unity. It is a cover for something far worse." Ray's blood ran cold. He had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed sent a fresh wave of anger through him. Leah Vex continued, "The Zenovians do not seek to integrate your species. They seek to erase it in a different way. Slowly, over generations." A chill crept up Ray's spine. "What do you mean?" Leah Vex finally turned to face him, her glowing eyes filled with something he hadn't expected, genuine concern. "Your DNA is being manipulated. If this continues, within a few generations, pure humans will no longer exist." Ray clenched his fists. This wasn't marriage. This was extinction disguised as diplomacy. And now he had 72 hours to find a way to stop it. Ray Carter's mind was spinning as he followed the Zenovian enforcer through the endless metal corridors of the High Chancellor's fortress. Leah Vex's whispered warning still echoed in his ears. "Your DNA is being manipulated. If this continues, within a few generations, pure humans will no longer exist." His fists clenched as he walked, his every instinct screaming that this so-called marriage law was nothing more than a slow, calculated extermination. They weren't wiping humanity out with weapons. They were doing it through forced integration, until no true humans remained. The enforcer stopped in front of a massive door. Without a word, it scanned its wrist against the control panel. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a vast chamber bathed in eerie blue light. In the center of the room stood High Chancellor Virex, the AI overlord of the Zenovian Empire. Its metallic face was expressionless, its glowing eyes filled with cold calculation. Ray stepped inside, flanked by his three so-called brides, Sora Kai, Leah Vex, and Zel Ra. The doors shut behind them with a heavy finality. Virex's voice echoed through the chamber, smooth yet devoid of any true life. "The integration process has begun. You will comply with all requirements of the Galactic Senate's decree." Ray's jaw tightened. "And what if we refuse?" Virex tilted its head slightly. "Refusal is not an option. Humanity's survival depends on its ability to evolve." Sora Kai, the Zenovian warrior, crossed her arms. "We should not waste time on threats, High Chancellor. The bonding process is complete. We should discuss the next phase." Ray shot her a glare. "Next phase? You mean the part where we're forced to have children for your so-called integration plan? Liavex took a step forward. High Chancellor, I require access to the genetic sequencing data from the Human Integration Project. As a scientist, it is my duty to analyze its long-term effects. Virex's glowing eyes flickered. Access denied. The data is classified. A cold realization settled over Ray. They were hiding something. Something big. Zelra let out a low growl. If you are so confident in your plan, why keep secrets? A true warrior does not fear the truth. Virex's expression didn't change. You have your orders. The decree is final. Ray knew then and there that he couldn't play along anymore. He had to act. Now. Later that night, he found himself back in his assigned quarters. A sleek, soulless chamber that felt more like a high-tech prison than a home. His mind raced as he replayed everything that had happened. Liavex knew something. And if she was willing to challenge the High Chancellor, it meant she wasn't fully loyal to the Zenovians. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. The door slid open, and Liavex stepped inside. Her white, pupilless eyes met his. We need to talk. Ray gestured for her to close the door. You're not just some scientist, are you? She hesitated, then shook her head. No. I was sent here under orders to study human adaptability. But the more I researched, the more I realized the truth. The Zenovians are not integrating their species. They are replacing it. Ray felt a cold weight settle in his chest. How long do we have? Liavex's voice was grim. Less than a century. Within 4 generations, no pure humans will remain. The Zenovians have engineered a genetic drift that will erase humanity's distinct traits, replacing them with controlled hybrid offspring that answer only to the Empire. Ray took a slow breath. It wasn't just about control. This was genocide. A deep voice rumbled from the doorway. Then we fight. Ray turned to see Zelra standing there, her reptilian eyes glowing with battle-hardened fury. The Draxian warrior stepped inside, crossing her muscular arms. I suspected something was off from the beginning. The Zenovians do not seek alliances. They seek dominance, and I do not serve cowards. Ray smirked despite the situation. So, what? You're on our side now. Zelra bared her fangs in something between a grin and a threat. I do not fight for weak causes, but I do fight for honor. And this, she gestured around them. This is not honor. It is cowardice disguised as politics. Liavex nodded. There is a rebellion forming, small, but growing. Humans who have managed to stay hidden, waiting for the right moment to strike. I can get us to them. Ray felt the fire reignite in his chest. The rebellion was real. Before he could respond, the door suddenly hissed open again. Sorake stood there, arms crossed, eyes burning with suspicion. What are you planning? For a moment, the room was silent. Tension crackled in the air. Then, to Ray's surprise, Liavex stepped forward. The truth, Commander. The Zenovians are lying to you. This law is not about peace. It's about control. About destruction. Sorake's violet eyes flickered with something unreadable. Then, in a move no one expected, she stepped inside and closed the door behind her. Prove it, she said. Ray and Liavex exchanged glances. This was the moment. Liavex pulled out a small device from her belt and activated it. A holographic projection filled the room. A secret genetic sequencing chart pulled from the Zenovian databanks. It showed the gradual elimination of human genetic markers, replaced by controlled hybrid DNA strands. By the end of the chart, no trace of true humanity remained. Sorake stared at the data in silence. Then she turned to Ray. If this is true, she exhaled sharply. Then the Zenovians have betrayed my people as well. Ray stepped forward, determination burning in his eyes. Then help us. The rebellion is out there, waiting for a leader. We can end this before it's too late. Sorake hesitated. She had been raised to follow orders, to obey the Zenovian hierarchy without question. But now, everything she believed in was falling apart. Finally, she lifted her gaze. "I will not betray my empire," she said. Ray's heart sank. But then she added, "But I will not stand by it while it commits genocide." A slow smile spread across Ray's face. "Then let's make history." Zelora grinned. "About time." I was getting bored. Lyavex nodded. "We will need to move quickly. If Virex suspects anything, we will be erased before we get the chance to fight." Ray's adrenaline surged. For the first time since Earth fell, he felt something he hadn't in a long, long time. Hope. The rebellion was awakening. And soon, the Zenovians would realize their greatest mistake. They underestimated humanity. Ray Carter crouched behind a stack of metal crates, his pulse pounding in his ears. The dim glow of emergency lights cast long shadows across the underground resistance bunker. Around him, humans and alien defectors worked frantically, preparing for the battle that would decide humanity's fate. The rebellion had been gathering strength for years in the shadows, but now, thanks to Lyavex's stolen data, they finally had proof of the Zenovians' true intentions. The forced marriages, the genetic manipulation, it was all part of a slow but deliberate extermination plan. Ray had spent the last 72 hours rallying every hidden fighter he could find. Tonight, it ended. A holographic map flickered in the center of the bunker, displaying the Zenovian control hub. The towering AI command station pulsed with energy, its structure carved into the side of a massive alien citadel. It was the heart of their empire, and if they took it down, they could sever the Zenovians' control over Earth. Sorake stood beside the map, her violet eyes scanning the battle plans. She was still Zenovian by birth, but the truth had shattered her blind loyalty. Now she was here, fighting against her own people. Zelora tightened the straps on her armored gauntlets, her reptilian grin sharp as a blade. "I say we go in loud, rip through their defenses before they even know what's happening." Lyavex shook her head. "No. The control hub is heavily fortified. If we don't disable their planetary shields first, we'll never get close." Ray took a deep breath. "Then we hit both. We launch a full frontal attack to draw their forces while a second team infiltrates and takes down the shields. Once they're down, we bring the fight to the High Chancellor himself." A murmur of agreement rippled through the resistance fighters. This was it, the moment humanity pushed back. As the final preparations were made, Ray found himself standing near the bunker entrance, staring at the distant glow of Zenovian patrol ships sweeping the city. Lyavex stepped beside him, her expression unreadable. "You realize the chances of success are low," she said softly. Ray exhaled, his grip tightening on his rifle. "Then we make sure we go down fighting." Lyavex studied him for a moment before nodding. "Then let's make history." The attack began at midnight. Explosions erupted across the city as human fighters surged from the underground tunnels, catching the Zenovians off guard. Plasma bolts lit up the night, tracer fires streaking through the air as the first wave of resistance forces clashed with the enemy. Ray led the infiltration team, moving swiftly through the underbelly of the city. They were heading toward the shield generator, their path guarded by towering Zenovian sentinels. Sorake moved ahead, her energy blade cutting through enemy patrols with brutal precision. The deeper they went, the tighter the security became. Zelora barreled through a squad of enforcers, her claws tearing through their armor as she cleared a path. Lyavex hacked into a security panel, bypassing the automated turrets before they could activate. Finally, they'd reached the shield generator chamber. It was a massive structure, pulsing with raw energy. But before they could move, the chamber doors slammed shut behind them. A cold, mechanical voice echoed through the room. "Resistance detected. Termination protocol engaged." The walls hummed as a dozen robotic enforcers descended from the ceiling, their energy weapons locking onto the team. Ray raised his rifle. "Looks like they were expecting us." Zelra cracked her knuckles. Good. I was hoping for a warm-up. The battle was brutal. Plasma fire filled the chamber as the team fought their way through the mechanized defenses. Sora Kai moved like a whirlwind, her energy blade slicing through the sentinels. Sil Ra tore through their ranks with sheer brute force, while Laya Vex provided covering fire, using her advanced tech to disrupt their targeting systems. Ray ducked behind cover, lining up a shot before taking down one of the last sentinels. The generator control panel was just ahead. Leah, he called out. Can you shut it down? She ran to the console, her fingers flying over the controls. Almost there. Just keep them off me. Another wave of enforcers poured in, but before they could attack, Sora Kai lunged forward, throwing a plasma grenade into their ranks. The explosion sent a shockwave through the chamber, buying Laya Vex just enough time. The shield generator flickered, then went dark. Across the city, the massive energy barriers protecting the Zenovian control hub collapsed. Ray activated his communicator. Shields are down. All teams, move in. Outside, the night erupted into chaos. Human fighters surged forward, now able to strike at the heart of the Zenovian stronghold. Explosions rocked the city as Zenovian warships scrambled to respond, but it was too late. The resistance was inside. Ray and his team raced toward the control hub, pushing through enemy lines as they neared the final battleground. At the top of the citadel, the High Chancellor awaited. Virex stood before them, its cold, mechanical face betraying no emotion. Your defiance is illogical. Surrender, and your species may yet survive. Ray raised his rifle. You made one mistake. Virex tilted its head. And what is that? Ray stepped forward, his voice unwavering. You underestimated humanity. The final battle had begun. The control hub trembled as explosions roared in the distance. The battle had reached its peak. Fires raged in the shattered corridors, and the echoes of war filled the air. Screams, gunfire, the mechanical whir of Zenovian war machines. Ray Carter stood at the entrance of the High Chancellor's chamber, his rifle clutched tight. This was it. No more running, no more hiding. Humanity's survival would be decided here, in this final confrontation. Behind him, his team moved into position. Laya Vex checked her datapad, her fingers flying over the holographic interface. I've located the central command core. If we disable it, we can shut down the entire Zenovian control system on Earth. Zelra cracked her knuckles, her reptilian eyes burning with anticipation. Good. Then let's end this. Sorakai gripped her energy blade, her violet eyes scanning the chamber's massive, glowing structure. Stay sharp. Virex won't go down without a fight. The battlefield was silent now, except for the crackling of fires and the distant sounds of collapsing Zenovian structures. The sky, once filled with alien warships, was now open, revealing the first light of dawn breaking over the ruins of Earth's greatest cities. The war was over. Humanity had won. Ray Carter stood atop the shattered remains of the Zenovian control hub, his rifle hanging loosely at his side. His body ached from the brutal battle, but the weight on his shoulders felt lighter than it had in years. Around him, his team gathered, their faces etched with exhaustion and triumph. Zelra leaned against a fallen pillar, wiping blood, both hers and the enemy's, from her cracked armor. I'll admit it, human, she said with a smirk. That was one hell of a fight. Sorake stood nearby, her violet eyes scanning the sky. The Zenovians are pulling back. Their forces are in complete disarray. Without Virex, they have no central command. Laya Vex was tapping on her datapad, tracking enemy movements. I'm picking up distress signals from Zenovian ships. Some are surrendering, others are simply fleeing. She paused, glancing at Ray. We did it. Ray exhaled slowly, letting the reality sink in. It wasn't just over here, it was over everywhere. The Zenovians had conquered dozens of worlds, but humanity had shown them that even the strongest empires could fall. A message crackled through their comms. To all resistance forces, the enemy is retreating. I repeat, the enemy is retreating. Earth is free. A massive cheer erupted across the city. Fighters who had fought tooth and nail for survival now raised their weapons in victory. Civilians, once cowering in fear, stepped out of the ruins to see the sky free of enemy ships for the first time in years. Ray turned to his team. We need to secure what's left of the city. Make sure the remaining Zenovians don't try anything desperate. Zelra stretched her arms, her claws glinting. Oh, let them try. I could use the exercise. Sora K nodded. I'll lead a squad to ensure all high-ranking officials are captured. They need to answer for what they've done. Lyavex frowned at her screen. We also need to decide what to do with their technology. The Zenovians had advanced AI networks, weapons we barely understand. We could use it to rebuild. Ray looked at the remnants of the enemy's empire, a power that had enslaved humanity, but could now be a tool for its rebirth. First, he said, we make sure Earth is safe. Then we decide what kind of future we want. Hours passed, and the first real signs of peace settled over the city. Survivors gathered in the streets, helping each other, sharing supplies, mourning the fallen. For every victory, there had been sacrifice. Friends lost, families torn apart. Ray saw people embracing, others staring at the wreckage of what was once their home. But they had hope. A young girl ran up to Ray, her clothes torn, but her face bright with a smile. Mister, are the aliens gone? Ray knelt, smiling despite his exhaustion. Yeah, kid. They're gone. She grinned and ran back to her mother, who nodded at Ray with tears in her eyes. As the sun climbed higher, broadcasts spread across the world. The rebellion was more than just Earth. Other occupied planets had risen up. The fall of the Zenovian AI network had sparked a galactic revolution. Worlds that had once been enslaved now had a chance to fight for their own freedom. Ray and his team gathered in what remained of their command center, now filled with human leaders, former prisoners, and alien defectors who had helped in the fight. A holographic map showed the remnants of the Zenovian Empire. It was fractured, weakened. Some Zenovian warlords were still out there, but they no longer had their AI overlords to guide them. A man in a torn military uniform spoke up. We have a choice now. We can stay here and rebuild, or we take the fight to the remaining Zenovians and make sure they never come back. The room fell silent. Zelra smirked. You already know what I vote for. Sora K nodded. If we don't finish this war, they'll return. It might take years, but they will regroup. Lyavex sighed. We can't ignore the damage Earth has suffered. Our people need time to heal. If we spread ourselves too thin, we'll lose what we just won. Ray listened, thinking. There was no easy answer. Then he looked at the people outside, the survivors, the ones who had fought for every inch of their freedom. He saw the fire in their eyes, the determination. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were warriors. He turned to the room. We do both. We rebuild Earth, but we don't let the Zenovians recover. We send strike teams to their remaining strongholds. If they try to rise again, we'll be there to stop them. Murmurs of agreement spread through the room. Lyavex gave a tired smile. Then I guess we have a lot of work ahead of us. Zelra cracked her knuckles. Good. I was getting bored anyway. Sora K sheathed her blade. We don't just fight for survival anymore. We fight for our future. Ray stepped outside, looking at the rising sun. For the first time in years, it didn't feel like the beginning of another desperate battle. It felt like a new beginning. Humanity had not just survived. They had won.